Okay, we're here on August 21st, 2001, in the new sunroom, Muriel sunroom.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Muriel sunroom out here at the Erickson farm, which is on Betzel Road, right?
Right.
How far from town?
Mile and a half.
Yeah, so right overlooking town practically.
Right.
Yeah,
You moved the high chair.
I moved the high chair.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I was just thinking the background shouldn't be a high chair.
No.
At this stage in our life.
Now, when did you guys meet?
1948.
Under what circumstances?
No, we didn't meet in 48.
Well, when I really, what do you mean? We didn't. That's when I really met you at the dance over at the.
It was in 1949, Jim.
49. Oh,
40.
okay. Well, let's get that straight now.
49. At the youth center in Ashland.
Ashland.
I was home for my first visit right after I started college, and was there with some friends, and Jim and his entourage from Bayfield arrived with a bang, and we had seen each other before that. Jim used to come into my dad's garage and buy parts and stuff for his tractors and so on, and I worked in the office at my dad's garage.
Where was
at the
that?
Ford garage in Ashland.
Uh-huh.
And I'd seen him. Thought he was kind of cute. But we really had never spoken until then. So when we met at the youth center,
Right.
then we went out to a bar, I think, didn't we? The old Airport Inn.
Airport Inn.
Yeah. And
Katie Hicks.
no, that wasn't at the Airport Inn, Jim.
No, I know, but we used to go to Katie Hicks.
Well, we're
She
talking about that night.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
What was your opening line, Jim? You remember?
Well, I was, she was dancing with another girlfriend, and so I just kind of cut in there and started dancing with her, and this young Vic Grunke was with me, and he had his eye on her too. So I just says, just back off. She's mine. And not knowing at the time I was ever going to get married.
Yeah.
But, I made my, I like what I seen, I suppose, on the first look. So. But I saw Muriel before too, so.
And then you were just back from college, you said.
I was home for my first visit after I had started college at Stout in Menominee, Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm. So what happened then?
So that night, after we did this, we were coming home with Grandpa Erickson's truck, his new Dodge truck, which I was not driving. We rolled it over on Sewer Flats. And then Nancy Hauser was Muriel's
My roommate.
Told Muriel about this when she got back, because we got back to college, and so she wrote me a letter. So that started it all, really. This about the smashed up truck, which Grandpa wasn't too happy about that.
I guess not.
Because it really tore it apart, and I fell out of the truck, and this Harold Mackey's father picked me up in the ditch, and lucky the truck was completely totaled out. We could, all the three of us got killed, but we made her.
Who was in the truck?
Young Vic Grunke.
Mm-hmm.
Vic, his name was Victor, and then I'll never forget the guy's name from Chicago, Guy Vitti. Little Italian guy. He was driving, and I woke up. I fell asleep coming across the flats. When I woke up, the truck was laying at 80 miles an hour, and here come that bridge.
Ooh.
So, but then Nancy told about my experience.
Nancy Hauser, who was from Bayfield, of course, was my roommate in college, and so she told me about the accident. So I wrote a short letter to see if Jim was okay.
Yeah.
So then, from then on, whenever I'd come home from school for a visit, we would go out.
Right.
And I made a lot of trips to Menominee, a lot of them, during the week. So.
Yeah.
And when did you, then how long did it take you guys to actually get married?
Well,
Well, I had just started as a freshman in 49, and so I graduated in 53. And we went together on and off all during those years. And then when I graduated, I taught my first year in Rice Lake, Wisconsin. And we continued to date, and at that time then, we decided that we would get married. And so we were married in the summer of 54
Mm-hmm.
in Ashland. That's my hometown.
Right.
So
So that means you've been married for
40,
47 years.
47.
just about the
All
50th.
this- Never had an argument.
Yeah. Yeah. I know otherwise.
Yeah.
47 years of bliss,
Yeah.
as I always tell everyone. And of course, during that time, we raised our family of 5 daughters and 1 son.
Right. Well, go through them now. What are their names and
Okay.
in order.
You don't want to know the dates of their birthdays right
No.
now, do you? Okay, the first one that we had was Cindy. And then it was Vicky, 2 years later, and Beth, 1 year later, and Fred, 18 months later, then Paula, 2 years later, and Mary, 3 years later.
Oh boy.
So
One after the other.
there were 6 kids in 10 years.
Oh boy.
So during that time, I didn't teach much,
I guess
except at home, that is. But after the last one was born, then I went back teaching and taught at Bayfield and I taught family and consumer education for 29 years.
right. And what year did you retire?
I retired in 1990. They
Right.
offered us early retirement, and I kind of had in mind that I was going to open the country store. And so I went for it and been operating the store ever since.
Yeah. So you've been retired 11 years now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Tired or she wasn't quite tired.
No, I
she
just
retired, but she
Yeah.
wasn't. Didn't want to. She retired, but she wasn't tired. So that's
Well,
what
I
stuck.
decided to start a second chapter, as I always tell everybody. This is my second chapter.
Right.
So, and I'm enjoying it very much. I
Yeah.
like the meeting and greeting of new people, and I like always have liked shopping. So I love to go to market and purchase things for the shop.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, we dragged in that old log cabin from Red Cliff and opened an antique store.
Right.
So that was another venture.
Good. Now, Muriel, as long as we're on your story, tell me where your folks' names, where they were born, where they came from, grandparents.
Okay, my dad's folks came from Holland, and
Oh.
they settled in Ashland on Sanborn Avenue, and the rest of the Raffers settled in De Pere. That's where the majority of the paternal relatives are.
Now, what
is
were
in
your?
De Pere.
You're talking your grandparents there, or your parents? Which
Your
I'm
grandparents?
talking about my grandparents.
And what were their names?
They were Bill and Nell Raffers.
And did they come over here from Holland?
Yes, they did.
So they were born in Holland.
They were born in Holland, right.
Well, what brought them here?
Well, I think times were kind of tough over there, and so he and my grandfather and his cousin came over, and they settled in Ashland on adjoining farms, and both raised big families, and they managed, along with farming and cattle and working logging, to make a living. And the old homestead is still on Sanborn Avenue in Ashland.
It is.
And my dad,
Now, where is that located?
Sanborn Avenue, let's see, how will I describe it? It's
well, that's the.
by the cemeteries. You know where the cemeteries are in Ashland? Okay, you just continue on that road, and it's further, maybe 3 miles down the road.
Is it still a working farm or? No.
Yes, there are some people that are still working the farm, right. The adjoining one is no longer being used, but my grandfather's is.
Now there's a Roffers, is it construction or trucking
Yeah.
or? Is
That is my cousin's.
That's your cousin?
That was
Okay.
my dad's brother's children.
Okay.
And Al started the construction business many, many years ago, and then the two boys, Ron and Gary, took it over. And Al is, of course, deceased. And my dad, when he was younger, worked with his brother Tony, who had the Dodge garage in Ashland. And so he got his taste of the automobile business there, and then formed a partnership with his cousin Frank, and they had the Chevrolet garage. And then my dad broke off from Frank, and he had the Plymouth garage for a while, and then decided that Fords would sell better, so he got the Ford franchise. And so he was in Ashland with the Ford garage for
41 years.
41 years.
Uh-huh.
And on the site now where the garage was stands the Hardee's restaurant in Ashland. It always gives me kind of a pang because he sold the property after he retired to that franchise. And the building across the road from the Hardee's is the Ashland Chamber of Commerce right now. That building still stands. That used to be the farm implement building. And then it was the body shop. Yeah.
Right.
So
And what was your dad's name?
my dad's name was Fred.
Fred, and he married whom?
He married my mother, Beatrice Shefchik.
And what was?
And they immigrated from Canada. They lived in Canada. And there my grandmother and grandfather met, and then he worked on the railroad and lived near Wakefield and Bessemer, that area, and finally settled on a farm on what they call Sweet Alley in Ashland, out of Ashland. And of course, my mother grew up there, and she attended County Normal, which was a teacher training college, and she taught 1 through 8 in a little one-room schoolhouse, and that's when Dad and she met, and then they subsequently married.
She was only 16 years old, wasn't she?
She was 16 when she
That's
started
cool.
teaching.
Oh my
right?
God.
So they were very young when they got married too. I think she was maybe 20 when they got married, and they had 3 children. I was the oldest, and then I have 2 brothers, Dale and David.
And where are they now?
They both live in the Twin Cities. Dale is a stockbroker with Payne Weber, and Dave is in the school administration business. He was the assistant superintendent of schools in the Twin Cities for many years, and now has retired, and he is teaching out of St. Mary's College in Winona. He teaches graduate students. So, and Dale is still a stockbroker, always giving us these good tips.
Yeah.
Yeah, some good tips.
Yes. It always seems like whenever he gives us a tip, then the stock goes down.
Yeah, of course. Now, what were your mother's folks' names?
My mother's name, or my mother's name was Amanda, and my grandfather's name was William.
And their last name, how do you spell that?
Shefchik, Shefchik. It's a Bohemian name.
Right.
And my grandmother, like I say, and grandfather came from Canada, and they always say, you must have a little Indian grandma back there in Canada, because usually they intermarried with the natives up there, and then they moved here.
Right.
So I can't.
So you're a mixture of Dutch and Bohemian.
Dutch, French, and Bohemian.
French and Bohemian. Yeah.
Half Dutch and the rest.
And you got mixed up with a Norwegian.
And you got mixed up
And
with
then
the
there's a Norwegian here, so we claim a combination of nationalities. So
our kids are pretty well, they're kind of mixed. You got a good mixture.
the children.
They sure are, yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. And right now we have what is it, 11 grandchildren?
Yeah. I
And
think it is.
11 or, well, yeah, I think it is. I think it is too. We just had a new grandbaby a month ago, so the race continues.
Yeah. Now, how many of your kids have stayed around here? Who's around here now?
They are all around here except Paula, who lives in Prentice, Wisconsin. And her husband is married to Don Anderson. His dad was the superintendent of schools in Bayfield for, gosh, I don't know how many years. 30 years maybe?
30-some years.
30 plus years. And he teaches tech ed at Prentice, and Paula is a court reporter with the court system in Phillips.
And what about the other ones? What are they up to?
Cindy is a teacher at Head Start in Bayfield. Vicky sells real estate, but right now she's decided to go back to school into early childhood education. She wants to become a teacher too, and works as a tutor with children from Red Cliff. Beth, of course, took my place as home ec teacher in Bayfield, and her husband is the superintendent in Washburn. Fred, of course, lives right back in the orchard, and he is a diesel mechanic with the Bayfield County. And then there's Paula.
And then Mary.
And Mary.
Yeah.
Mary just moved back from the cities. She was living in the cities and married a fellow from the cities, and they decided they didn't want to raise their children there, so moved back here. She's a phlebotomist, and right now she's not working. She has a new baby, so they have 2 little girls.
Well, that's unusual that so many of your kids have stayed around here, because the problem is everyone leaves.
Yeah. Well, I'm very happy about Freddie. I mean, he's back on the original Erickson farm.
Right.
And he
So-
gives Jim a hand a lot during the growing season, and it's kind of nice to have him around. He's always fixing something
Oh yeah,
for Jim.
that was his dad breaks, I fix. Used to be the other way around. Freddie used to break and Dad had it fixed, but now it's reversed. Now.
Right.
If I break down, Freddie fixes.
Yeah.
So
Well, Jimmy, let's go back into your heritage and your grandparents on both sides and your dad and so on. When did your
well, as close as I got his immigration papers down in the basement, but he came here before the turn of the century. And Grandpa Erickson, he was in the United States 3 times before the age of 21 on a sailing vessel. He left home when he was 13 years old. And my grandmother came from Stavanger, in Norway.
where did he come from in Norway?
Egerson.
Okay.
And they met in this country. And so he logged, and he started fishing. But he logged on Oak Island, one of his first jobs. He logged on Oak Island for the Weyerhaeuser at that time owned it. I mean, they were the big logging companies in here. And well, you know the history of the logging in Bayfield. Well, he was part of that. A lot of the immigrants went to work. They always used to tell a story, a little joke about the Norwegians. They got off at Ellis Island, and they give him a box of snuff and a Booth fishery label and shipped them to Bayfield. So, but he worked. He always. He was a great. I always admired him. I think for that. I think that's where we get all of our hard work. He never gave up. When he hit Ashland, Wisconsin, he had 50 cents in his pocket, and he thought he had relations in Bayfield. And he worked over the Sioux Line ore dock over there, the Sioux Line depot, shoveling coal from one bin to another to get enough money to get on the train to come to Bayfield.
Mm-hmm.
So I always tell the story about, he loved it here, I think because the hills, the rocks, and the lake. I think he thought he was back in Norway.
Yeah, right.
And
What was his name?
Martin.
Erickson.
Martin
Yeah.
Erickson. And
And how about Grandma Erickson? What was her
she
name?
was a Christine. She was a Mickelson.
Christine?
Christine.
Mm-hmm.
And her father died in Norway. So great grandma, well, she married a guy by the name of Brown. So that's when she brought there was 5 sisters. And they came over, and she ran a boarding house at Royce Point Sawmill.
Oh,
Sure, Grandma Brown did. And that's where, well, then the girls had worked there too.
mm-hmm.
And so Grandpa Erickson met her out there in, at the boarding house. And
Because by that time he was logging.
he was logging and commercial fishing. He was also He started fishing with Booth Fisheries, and he had made enough money to buy a couple boxes of nets. And he started with a rowboat, and then he'd make a little money. Then he kept on working with Booth, and so then he finally got into it himself, and he was a pretty successful.
And where did he fish out of?
Right out of Bayfield here, and then he had a place on Rocky Island,
Mm-hmm.
and which my cousin Jack has yet. This, the old
Right.
fish camp out there, and he worked him and Julia Nelson's father and Grandpa worked together as partners sometimes. And they just went on their own.
Yeah.
They finally made enough money where they could buy their own boats. But that's how he started out, with a skiff.
What was his first boat? That he, bigger boat that he
The bigger, well,
remember?
he had 2 or 3 small ones. And back then, they had a registration number on them. I remember he had a little one longer, about a 28-foot, had a Regal engine in it. And that was maybe one of his first with a power in it. And he fished all by himself. He always used to go out and he'd fish herring with an open boat. And he always told the stories about when he'd come in, he'd have to chop the ice off him because of the spray coming over. And then they'd help him get out of the boat. Then he'd go into the boilers at Booth and thaw out.
Yeah.
Then they'd pull the herring out of the boat, and they'd put it in the shed, and he'd pick the fish out. But he did it all by himself, Then he bought another little bigger boat. I remember when he built the Marianne, which is still Dick Grindle owns her yet. He built that in 1941, and he was really proud of that new boat. But that was one he built himself. Had built himself.
So was that a tug then? By then?
Yeah, it was a fish tug. Yeah.
Right.
Matter of fact, it's still fishing. Richard Gurnall owns it now.
Yeah. So Martin and what was her name? Christine. Christine got married here in Bayfield then.
Right in Bayfield, yeah.
And when was Ed born then?
He was born in 1909. My dad was born in 1909.
Yeah.
I think. It was
And
1989.
what were the other kids?
Well, there was Helena was the oldest. Then there was Melvin, Anna, Ed, Marion, Toddy. Well, here, there's a picture over here. Name them off over here. Just give me a second.
Yeah, why don't you bring it and just hold it in front of you and I'll take a picture of it and you can point out who they are.
Here's when they were all living right here.
Okay, let me get...
And this is after Grandpa and Grandma passed away, so.
Okay, so from...
The only
I see Mel on the left now. Why don't you go across from
Okay.
there? A second, let me get...
There's Mal,
A sec. Gotta get it back.
Mal, Anna, Ed, Helena, which was the oldest.
Yeah.
Bernice, Lillian, Lillian and then Clarice.
Uh-huh.
But there was, Marion Toddy was already passed, she passed away, she died of leukemia, so she's not on here. Then there was a baby, there was another boy that died he was maybe a couple weeks old when he passed away. So there was 9 of them all together. It was 3 boys and 6 girls in this family.
Right. Big families in those
Big
days.
family.
Yeah.
So.
And
And this was taken on the old Joyce E. Mal's old boat that he So proud of you. That was his Rocky Island, and after he bought that, after he got rid of this old one, then they bought him and Julian bought the clutch,
Right.
which is still running it today. So
Yeah, Bobby Nelson has
Bobby
it.
Nelson has it today.
And so we don't forget about it, tell the story about the Mel and the clutch. Why it was named the clutch.
Why he named it the clutch? He would tell Denny Edwards. He say the clutch goes in at 9 o'clock, and if you're not here, you're gonna have to walk the Rocky. So that was one of his, or anybody wanted to ride with him. He had something about 9 o'clock in the morning. At that time, that's when the clutch went in. And if you're not there, he said you have to walk or find another ride. But I'm leaving at 9. He let everybody know that.
Yeah, Mel was quite a character.
He was quite a character. He was a great guy.
And let's then, Ed, your mother's name was what?
Nellie.
Nellie.
Yeah.
And Ed and Nellie both grew up here then?
They both grew up in Bayfield here, and her parents came from Canada. Her mother's parents came from Canada.
What were their names?
Heberts.
Right.
Hey, bear.
Yeah. So you were related to Len.
Leonard was my uncle.
Right.
Which he was born and raised in Bayfield here. Lived up. Matter of fact, Len was born up at by the high school, and that old house is still standing there.
Mm-hmm.
And he left and went to was in the army. He worked for Ed on the outer island for many years. He was going to college, then he was in the Navy. When he became a school teacher, which he retired, and he moved back to Bayfield, which he was mayor. That was his love of Bayfield. He loved Bayfield. So he fulfilled a dream before he passed away.
Yeah, and he was my neighbor there for some years.
I know, and he was. It's too bad. I mean, Len had a lot to offer. He did a lot for Bayfield, and he was going to clean it up and do do the right thing. So.
Well, what were the Heberts' names then? Nellie's folks.
You see. I never. Len's Grandpa Hebert died in. He had at the sanatorium TB.
Mm-hmm.
His name was Edmund. No, Fred Hebert. Fred. And I'm trying to think of what was.
Nellie's mother's name?
Yeah, that was. Well, they've been gone for so many years.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I think the whole Hebert family is deceased now. Clarence was the last one to pass away. He died a year ago. And the girls, Hazel, Edmund, he died many, many years ago. I didn't even know him at all because he died at the sanatorium. That was back in the TB days.
Yeah.
Tuberculosis.
And who are your siblings? Your brothers and sisters? And
Well, the oldest one is Jerry, and then my brother Richard was passed away 6 years ago.
mm-hmm.
Then Leonard, he don't like to be called anyway. Then Debbie.
Right. And where do you fit in then?
I'm the oldest.
You are the oldest.
I am the oldest.
Okay. And is there any other connections? Because there's so many Ericksons. I always wonder who's related to whom here.
Yeah, well, that's.
So Jackie's your cousin.
Jack's my cousin.
Mel was his father.
Mal was his father.
That's right.
Mal, yeah, and Jack had a sister Janet who had passed away 3 years ago, and there was Mel and Joyce had two children, Jackie and Janet,
Right.
and
And
Ed had there was two little brothers that there would have been 6 in our family if the 2 brothers would have lived, but they died of
yeah, that happened a lot in those days.
back. Yes.
Yeah.
So, but Grandpa Erickson always tells us, you want to get back to what when he met Grandma, he out at the boarding house, he rented a horse and cutter from the livery barn down here, and they always kidded him about he was on the porch too long out there doing, but the horse got tired and run home, come back to the barn, so Grandpa had to walk to Bayfield.
Now there were a lot of fishermen in those days.
A lot of fishing.
How many would you say were fishing out of Bayfield?
Well, at one time, there was 150, that's from Port Wing to Bayfield, and I'd say 90% of them were in the Bayfield area.
Right.
And so the rest, I'm just talking about the South Shore down to Bayfield here. And went from that to 60. And, back in the 60s, the Lamprey and stuff. So that went from that to 21. Right as today, there's only 10 left.
Yeah, right.
And the DNR thinks that's
Too many
yet.
Yeah, I know it.
So,
Now let's backtrack to when you guys got married. And where did you first live together?
We lived in Bayfield
Whereabouts?
in a little house downtown, and who owned that? Mildred
No, and Party.
and Party.
No. And I'm not Party. We were just talking about it the other day too. Right now, Norman Nelson lives in that same house.
And where's that?
It's down on 6th Street. Right down on Washington Avenue.
Yeah,
It's the second house down. Third house down.
below Washington.
Right.
Yeah.
That's where
And we didn't live there very long. Oh my God,
Here comes a tour bus.
here comes a tour bus.
you'll have to handle it.
Why don't we take a break?
That's,
Let me get in there and get focused, Jim. So who's that in the picture now?
that's my mother, Nell.
Mm-hmm.
And Ed.
And Ed. Boy,
It was a few years ago.
that's a few years. When do you think that picture was taken?
That was taken at least about 45 years ago.
Yeah.
One
That's
said
fine.
he doesn't drink much coffee.
Oh.
No.
He's not a good Norwegian.
No.
Of course, I'm not either.
Yeah. No.
I got into the coffee drinking habit in college when, I
Yeah.
sat around in the union and played cards and drank coffee.
Well, let's go back. You were in this little house, or whatever, the house in Bayfield when you were first
Yeah.
married. And what were you each doing? You were teaching?
I was teaching.
I was
right?
teaching, I was on the farm and fishing.
So,
I was,
this farm?
no.
No.
Back,
He was working for
And I also, I worked.
Christine and Martin.
my
Where was their
grandfather-
farm?
Back on the old farm, which we still own. That's where Freddie built his place. That original Erickson farm is still there. And when,
He was making $40 a week.
oh yeah, big bucks. So it was kind of. But then I also worked on Outer Island with Ed.
Uh-huh.
My dad, I worked with him on the Outer Island. So then I did some little commercial fishing. Kind of like then the farming. I guess I've carried on a tradition here. From the fishing, the farming, to
Yeah.
anything to survive. I think that's what I was telling everybody.
Well, Jim, when your grandfather was fishing, your grandmother, Christine, was the farmer.
Yeah.
She had the raspberry fields. She had the bean fields. They had cows. What else?
Well,
But Grandpa Erickson was more the
More
fisherman,
the
wasn't
fisherman,
he?
so-
And Grandma manned the farm. So Jim didn't get drafted or anything during the war
Oh,
because he was
The oldest and,
the oldest and they needed him to work the farm.
right.
well, not only, but that was 1943. I had a valid driver's license, which I was hauling the German prisoners up here the hill at 13 years old.
You were.
And I've always regretted, I wish I'd have kept that license. It was just a daytime occupational license only. And that's what I was doing, and then
Now, why in the world were they bringing German prisoners to Bayfield?
well,
They housed them at the old
they
courthouse.
housed them at the old courthouse.
But why to Bayfield?
Well,
I mean, where?
I think they were running. These were not the hardcore. They were just drafted like everybody
They
else.
were kind of kids, weren't they?
No, there was some of them. They
Older?
were older, and
But where were they captured?
I'm trying to. I really.
I mean, where they were captured in Germany or in
Captured
Europe,
Germany
and then
brought them over here.
brought back on a ship here?
Right. Brought them back on the ship.
Isn't that goofy?
Doesn't make much sense,
No,
does it?
they brought. Well, they were running out of room, I suppose.
How many prisoners were here?
Well, I think there was about 150.
There were.
Right,
That
and they
many?
all stayed in the old courthouse, which is the Park Service building today.
Mhm.
And they all had bunks upstairs. The whole thing was all fenced in, and they had guardhouses up on each corner. And but the guys, we were picking rocks down there. And they picked beans here.
So they were put to work
They
too.
were put to work, and they stayed through. They started picking the beans, and they picked the apples, and then they were also worked down in Ottawa
fish?
fishing herring, not cleaning fish, but mostly packing fish during because the government had Ottawa Keene Company and Booth Fisheries had a big contract with these two fisheries for fish.
Mm-hmm.
And so they worked down there, and they got paid something, I can't remember. We had to pay whatever the price was, I think it was 2.5 cents a pound for picking beans. We paid that to the government. My
Right.
grandmother did. And then returned, but I don't know what. But we had to pay whatever we were paying.
But
Whatever they got, I don't know.
prisoners probably got nothing. I mean,
Yeah.
they were.
Well, I think maybe they needed the manpower here for supplying food.
Yeah.
The men were all off,
Yep.
and so they came here to help during harvest time.
And the story I always loved this one though, was because Christine never went broke on the farm. Always made money. But Grandpa always says she always makes money as long as I'm making a lot of money fishing. But the fishing I always take the loss, but the farm always showed the profits. But that was just kind of the other way around. So
But they had lots of raspberries.
she was bean queen. I got a thing out in the store out there where she was bean queen one year
Uh-huh.
over all the other farmers in the whole area. And they raised a lot of beans in this Bayfield area. The Bayfield Canning Company was down there. I remember I used to start hauling like in 10 o'clock in the morning because they had so many pickers. That's what the Native Americans picking. There was 50, 60 people out there picking beans back on the old farm back there. And I'd start like hauling, come my school buddies, and we were kids.
How old were you then?
Well, 14,
Yeah.
15. But I was 13. I was hauling these prisoners up here at 13 years old, 1943, and right all the way through till they left. But we'd start hauling beans down to the cannery, and we never got done a lot of times till 6, 7 o'clock at night, one load after another. From 10 o'clock in the morning, just kept on hauling, up to 400 or 500 bushel
Yeah.
of beans.
Gee.
I remember they had them piled up all the way down, packed up to Ottawa, Boonings, that whole lot was full of beans piled outside.
Where was the cannery located?
Right, right across from, where City Hall got their garage is.
Mm-hmm.
That's right where the city garage is right now. That was where the cannery was.
Mm-hmm.
And there was nothing else. They owned all that property down there, and then they used to. There were so many beans coming, they had to pile them outside.
And that was right next to the end of the railroad. Then.
Right there,
Yeah.
The railroad used to come in right there, and that's where they hauled them out.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that must have been something.
And the 41 flood, I remember on the old farm, that's where a lot of them, we had beans planted across there in that July, and that's where 2 acres of land went that time. That's why I always said a lot of that property downtown belongs to this farm because there was little bean plants, no kidding, in the cannery.
Is that
The
right?
cannery filled up full of sand, and they found little bean plants that came off that farm down in that cannery.
Is that right?
Yeah, they always made a joke about it because they said, well, the beans are got here a little ahead of time. But that's when the 41 flood.
Now, when did the bean business end up here?
Well, when Doug Knight passed away, then they sold it to the Friday Candy Company out of New Richmond. And old man Friday, he wanted this year this was going to be he loved it in Bayfield, and he was going to keep that for just a little retirement thing. And well, when he passed away, he was only there about 3 years that I can remember, because we were raising beans after Muriel and I were married, and we were raising beans over here. And so when old Friday passed away, well, then the kids, the boys, it was too far north. It was just got to be a hassle, and then they just closed her down.
So this would have been maybe in the early 50s or something?
Early 50s.
Yeah.
Was that when we had Mexicans come and pick beans?
Well,
Was
I'll
it
tell
beans
you you were pregnant with one of the kids.
Cindy.
So that's right, because everybody told Muriel it's going to be a boy. It's going to be a boy. And this little Mexican gal, old lady, she says, "Walk ahead, lady, walk." And she says, it's going to be a girl.
Is that right?
That's all. She just told Muriel to walk away from her. And no, they don't know what they're talking about. She's going to be a girl. So.
Oh, I remember when they were here. It was really
they had a big camp.
fun. They had a big camp, and they shot a porcupine, and they roasted it over an open fire, and those
Where
were
did
good
they camp
days.
then? Just out in the...
Right out, they
In the
camped,
field.
and it was like 1 liter, and they had a nice looking truck, big truck, and they hauled all the people. They had a couple of trucks, and they loaded them all in there, and that's what they went around. They picked cucumbers all over, and then they followed the harvest. Did a heck of a good job, and they were very neat. As I can, I let them camp over there. They built their outside privies and all that, and they had big tent. When they left, you couldn't find there wasn't a thing left. They cleaned everything up beautifully, and when the bean season was over, so that was a big help to us because it was after the war and all that stuff. And
Yeah.
so, but then after, like I says, it was in the 50s when after old man Friday passed away, and the cannery died with him.
Yeah. Well, when did you guys move up here then?
We first on the old farm over there. We first fixed that up. That was in 1950.
Cindy was a baby.
Cindy was a baby.
That was in 55.
55.
And we fixed up the old house and did a lot of remodeling and worked real hard. Well, then we had the opportunity to buy this farm.
Now,
And my dad helped us out, and he said, "You're never going to make it with just this small acreage." He said, "I'll help you out." So he helped us buy this farm. So we moved over to the original house here that Olaf Selfers had. Olaf moved downtown. Right, and he sold us the place along with all of the equipment and the buildings and whatever, and we moved here.
so was it a working orchard then?
Everything. When we moved in here, there was 2 trucks, the tractors. Well, I had the tractors from that we bought out from Grandpa Erickson too, and had that machinery. But there was the grader, the apple shed. There was right. Just moved in and started to work.
Well, Olaf raised apples and strawberries.
You know, if I was, I can tell you what we.
What was his last name?
Selfers.
And 2 years ago, Olaf was never had any children, so he always took a liking to me. And so he had an offer at one time, and to talk about he liked me because he right after we bought the place, or before we bought it, we made a deal with him. And somebody else come in with nothing concrete. He'd always, But there was somebody offered him, and this gentleman like bought an orchard, this Davies. He said I was damn Olaf. He says I offered him $3,000 more for this place. And he said no. I told Jim and Muriel they're going to have this, and that was going to be the price. But a lot of times back then, $3,000 was a big carrot hanging out there. But he never reneged on the price, and matter of fact, I could even tell him what we paid for it. We bought all this for $18,000, but I'll tell you, it was a hard time raising the kids, and if it wouldn't have been for Muriel,
That was a lot of money.
Yeah.
Back
A lot of
then,
money.
$18,000.
and I said if it wouldn't have been for Muriel's father, we'd have lost it because we didn't make enough to make a payment. Well, he didn't hound us too much. It took us a lot of years
to pay him back
Yeah.
Pay him back.
$18,000.
And
Yeah.
another thing,
Because, John, this is kind of an example. When I moved to Bayfield and I taught here, I made $3,300 a year
Yeah.
teaching. So
That puts it in
$18,000 was a
then,
lot of money compared to that. And then sometimes Jim didn't get any fish, or maybe the
Yeah.
strawberries froze, or there was no apple crop, and we
Yeah.
had all these kids to feed. So,
so
times were tough,
that
and
was. But I said it wouldn't have been. And another thing that helped us, he never charged us no interest. Whatever was the principal that we owed him,
That was it.
if we could give him a few $100 or $1,000, that's what he got, and he was satisfied with it. So if it would have been for him, if we'd had it from a loan company or a bank, we'd have been down the road looking for someplace else to live.
well, I think it was that Dad wouldn't have even cared if we ever repaid him, but he figured that there's a matter of pride.
Yeah.
And if you pay for something, then you feel like it's yours rather
Yeah.
than it's just a gift.
It was never.
Right.
And those few little $100 that we could pay him every once in a while didn't mean anything to him. But it was a sacrifice for us, so
Yeah.
then it made us feel good.
Now, Muriel, you were having all these kids. Did you teach a little and then have a kid and teach a little more?
Well, Don Anderson always says when Muriel comes into the office, I know she's going to tell me she's pregnant again. Because there wasn't many years between each child, and so there were lots of years that I couldn't teach. And
Yeah.
then to find someone to take care of the kids after I had them all, Nancy Erickson babysat for me a lot when I went back teaching. And she'd bring her kids with her and then babysat. And I always remember Nancy, she was the best babysitter. I'd come home and my house was slick and clean, and she would have baked bread and cinnamon rolls. And you walked in the door and you smelled that freshly baked bread and cinnamon rolls. She was just wonderful, just wonderful. So after, however, Mary was born, I went back kind of permanently.
Yeah, right.
What year would have that been?
Oh dear, Mary is 36. So,
65?
Could be.
no, I don't.
1965?
Fred was born in 60, right?
Yeah.
So there was 2 kids after Fred. Yeah, it doesn't matter. I taught 29 years, that's all I can remember,
Right.
and I enjoyed every moment of it. I really loved the kids, so it was 29 really great years. So,
Well, that would have been 61 then, if you said you retired in 90.
yes, I did.
So
yes, I
61.
did, but I taught a few years before that.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
So in the 60s, early to mid 60s.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So what were you making by then? What big salary in Bayfield?
What big salary. Jeez, I don't even remember. It went up very slowly.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what I made when I retired, maybe 29,000.
Mm-hmm.
So,
It was.
and that was standard wage
Yeah.
at
Right.
that time.
Right.
And when I taught in Rice Lake, which was my first year out of college, you went to college 4 years, $2,900 was my salary.
Yeah.
And I saved money on it. So it's all relative. You
Yeah.
know, right now
Well,
that sounds like a pittance, but back then it was,
Well, Jimmy was making the big bucks.
yeah, when I
he was
planted-
making $40 a week,
No,
right?
I call that the Queen's Orchard down there because when I planted it and I took one of Muriel's checks and bought the apple trees, so I kind of figured it should be kind of named
Yeah.
after her a little bit anyway. So it was kind of the same story. We get right back to I'm never losing money on the farm as long as Muriel was teaching.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So
It was nice, it was a regular check, whereas with farming and fishing,
well.
it's feast or famine in many
But
instances.
after I bought the big boat, I mean the Cindy Marie and stuff, I was making money fishing with her.
Mm-hmm.
I could do more with it. And got into the trap nets and kept on.
Yeah, but in the 60s, the fishing went down the tubes.
I was here, there, I was fishing, went through the thick and the thin with the whole thing.
You kept going.
Never gave up.
Mm-hmm.
Just, and I guess that's the way it will, a lot of people just kind of quit because you had to, but like I said, with Muriel's check and a little bit coming off the farm, the fishing, we kept it going.
The irony of it all, though, is when you got lots of fish, the price was nothing. When you got a few fish, the price was up. You
Yeah.
know, it's
Well, like I
supply and demand, I guess, like with anything.
It was good until the DNR put the restrictions on us. He's leaving.
Okay, let's take a break because I want to. Okay, we're back.
Well, you want to hear that? I can remember that story. I mean, Jack and I we were fishing under the ice that winter. Fishing wasn't the best, and Donna and Jack lived down on top of Washington Avenue there, and Jack, cousin Jack, bought the farm he's on right at today. Bought that from Grandpa Erickson too.
Uh-huh.
Grandpa owned that place too, so. But one winter we were going to make a lot of money logging. So we went and bought a chainsaw, brand new. And so we convinced Muriel, I think Jackie convinced Donna this is going to be the year for the money. We'll make her, the fishing was bad, but we'll make her on the logging. So by the time we got done, we tore up a couple of tractors. And we paid for the chainsaw though. We had the chainsaw paid for it. We already got a few bucks out of it, but it was no big golden nugget. Yeah, that we kind of convinced Muriel and Donna we were going to make a lot of money cutting this hemlock. So, but it was
Where were you logging?
well back on the old farm back here,
Mm-hmm.
and down this other both places we were logging this by the ravine. What we could take off the top there, that's what we were taking, but it was not a good deal.
Yeah.
So
So that was
that was
the end of that experiment.
Yeah.
The end of
So
your
that-
logging career.
That was it. The end of the good thing I always tell Kid Jack, I said we had made any money, we might have became loggers.
Yeah.
Well, I can remember when you worked at DuPont.
I worked at DuPont.
Oh, you did?
Oh yeah.
Seems like everybody worked at DuPont at one time.
That was a good job.
What was your job there, Jimmy?
I was worked at Nitromix. I was on transportation and
Driving truck,
hauling stuff from the magazine, from Nitromix up to the magazines.
What were the magazines?
That's where they hauled them. That's where they shipped, packed it up there, and they had the supply houses. But down where I was, I worked in the building what blew up. But there was a lot of safety after that. But because they had they transferred the stuff down from one other building to another building. But when the same building I worked in down at Nitromix, that's the one that blew up that twice. Then they finally it didn't blow up anymore. But it was a safety. It was something they finally figured out. There was some motors that were overheating. That's what caused
the explosion.
What were they making at DuPont?
well, they were making dynamite. I mean, that Nitromix that's the one they used up in the mines. And you mix it with oil and nitrogen. I mean, just regular nitrogen, and they added some more to it, and that was that's what blew her when these motors were leaking. The story I always heard, and that's what caused that they added the oil to it. When they pumped it down, see, it was kind of a liquid, and when they pumped it down in the mines, and that's when they discovered that's what was happening. Just a little bit of oil dripping on that mix was what caused the explosion.
So when would this have been you were working at DuPont?
Let me see. That had to be. That was in the 60s too. Yep.
My dad
Because
worked.
Jim Frostman worked there too.
I was there the same year.
Were you?
I was there the same year. Bucky Batan worked there. A lot of guys from Bayfield worked down there. Old John Bamey used to ride with him, but John was always saving on gas, so he'd coast the damn car down Salvo Hill in a little peak hole to see, and he's telling stories. We'd ride down with him, and the story never was finished. Then we'd ride back home with him. Well, maybe the second day he'd finish that story. But we didn't ride with John anymore. We took our own car because. So then, Bucky and I were fishing on the ice too that time. So we work at DuPont, jump in the car and run out and lift a few nets till dark, and then come back home again, and we back to work the next day again. But still had that fishing. I had to be fishing.
Yeah.
So.
Well, if you had to choose between fishing and running the apple orchard and...
Well, I think it was the toughest thing I ever did in my life when I gave up my license. And I'll never forgive the DNR for that.
Yeah.
I said it could have been my own choice to do it, but they just forced me out of it, forced us all out of it.
Yeah.
And, I had a license for 49 years. It's a long time. And I still love the lake, and but no, the farming. Right now.
Well, I think it has given you the opportunity to spend more time farming since you're not fishing. There was a conflict there. Because you can't do both.
I often wonder how in the heck I did both, because I had the trolling boat too for 21 years. Charter business, you're trying to take care of that, and something's got to be cheated along the way. And a lot of times I think I was cutting back on the farm, but now that I put my full time here, maybe I might make a buck up here before I die. I don't know.
And you were teaching, so you couldn't be running the farm.
No. Well, she helped all she could.
In the summertime.
I helped during the summer, and I always said I really never had a vacation because from teaching we went to picking berries, strawberries, raspberries, whatever, and then of course I canned everything I got my hands on for the winter. When you have a big family, you have to do those things. So good thing I was a tough Dutchman. I always said I was brought up with the ethic that everything good and sacred is work. My dad was a hard worker. My mother never really enjoyed good health. So Dad worked very, very hard. He'd go to work in the morning at 7 and he'd come home many times at 9 o'clock at night. And during the war, talking about how everybody worked at DuPont, he was a guard at DuPont during the war. Walked the fence all night long so he could keep his men employed. There weren't any new cars then, and so he didn't want to lay off the men that he had employed in the shop, so he worked at DuPont so he could pay them and keep them on. So
Now, did he have the Ford dealership by then? Or?
Yes,
he had the Ford dealership in Ashland, Ford Mercury.
That's when he bought it, right during the war.
Yeah.
And,
So that was tough too.
Picking up a few used cars.
So kids today don't know what hard work is all about, I don't think.
No.
They just don't know the sacrifices that the elderly, as we like to call ourselves now, we are the older generation. So, and still working, still enjoying it.
Well, look at my dad, Ed. I mean, he always, they said, when are you going to quit, Ed? well, you know what happens when you quit? He said they haul you up the hill.
Yeah.
I think, John, you've heard that, make him that statement.
Yeah.
Well, see, Grandpa was the same way. When he he quit fishing, but he always had a little strawberry patch over here. He was always hoeing in that thing, and he said he wasn't going to quit because he always. Well, he said, you know what happens? You quit, you start walking the street, and pretty soon you get foolish in the head.
Well, I think he did.
How old did he live to be, Martin?
87. 87 years old, and he would have made her if he wouldn't have got run over by that. The guy hit him with a truck.
What?
He got run over
Where?
right by the Brown house. So he was out getting his mail, and the guy come around the corner, and it threw him right up on top of the snowbank. A little peak-hole wintertime. Threw him on top of the snowbank, and Mrs. Korsberg, first she called me. She says, "Your grandpa got hit," and I could call Ed right away. I mean, who else, you know? He was always there, so we went down there. He walked in the house. So Ed says, "Pa, so we'll take you to the doctor." I'm okay. And we took him over, put him in the truck, or the car. I can't remember how we got him over there. So the hospital, his leg was broke right off.
Oh,
And he walked in, I suppose the shock, but he walked in the house with his broken leg. And he kind of gave up after that. Because he made a comment, you know, I don't think I deserve this. And so when he he had a stroke after that. When he made up his mind to die, damn it, I can still see him, he had big hands. From the back, to look at from the back, you never could tell if it was Ed or Martin walking away because their ears kind of stuck out.
Yeah.
Well, you know, they looked so much alike. And the night my aunt was there with him, and I was down there, Ed was there, and the nurse came in with pills. He said, when I can't taste good Bayfield water anymore, it's over. And she says, "Come on, Martin, take these pills." And I could still see him. He took that hand, went up in the air, and the pills went up, and he told my aunt, he said, "It's over. It's done." And by God, he died at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh boy.
But he never wanted, he was something like Ed. He never wanted to go to a nursing home. And you can see what Ed did. He never wanted to go anywhere, which both of them kind of went the way they wanted to go.
I kind of suspect you have that attitude too.
I think so.
Yeah.
No, we didn't mention the fire, Jim.
Oh, yeah.
What fire is this?
This house burned.
This was a 2-story house one
This
time.
was a 2-story house, and we had 4 children. 4 children.
Yeah.
Okay, and unbeknownst to me, I was pregnant and I was tired, so I was laying on the couch by the fireplace. We used to have a fireplace here, and I smelled smoke, and I thought maybe the fireplace was backing up a little bit. Okay, well then all of a sudden there was an upstairs, and Beth came running down the stairs. Before that, Beth came running down the stairs. She said, "Mom, the upstairs is burning." So just then, Jim and Richard came in the door, and they went upstairs, grabbed Freddie out of the crib,
His little pet. Yeah.
and came downstairs with him. There was a door that closed off the upstairs, and he was burned.
He was.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, he was. Quite badly, actually. His hair was all burned off, and the backs of his hands. He was standing in his crib, and the flames were shooting out.
Whoa.
Luckily,
Yeah.
Beth did come downstairs and tell us the upstairs was burning. Well, then you ran upstairs
I grabbed him out of
with
the
the
crib.
kids, and of course, then I dressed the kids. Kind of the funny part is Richard and Jim were struggling to get the piano out of the house. The 2 of them carried this piano out of the house. Midwinter, it was like December, just before Christmas. 2 weeks before Christmas, yes.
Oh.
And so we got the kids dressed. The telephone rings, and it was my brother in the Twin Cities. "Well, Muriel, how are things going?" I said, "The house is on fire. And we called my dad.
He did.
Dale called my dad, right.
Oh.
And by the time I had the kids dressed and we were heading down the hill to Grandma and Grandpa Erickson's house, my dad was coming up the hill from Ashland. He must have driven 90 miles an hour to get over here. Well, the fire trucks came and so on, but the house was pretty much gutted out and the upstairs was burned completely. So we went down to Grandma and Grandpa Erickson's, and then we lived downtown for a while. I was teaching at the time.
Where'd you live there?
And right down the street from where we were getting
Right
married.
next
right
door.
In the corner, right next door.
Next
the corner
door.
house.
Right, kitty corner from the
With,
senior citizen apartments.
Rittenhouse Commons.
Commons.
Kitty corner right there.
Yeah, we lived there for the winter, and then we had Hilding Leafblad. He came up and added a wing on. I said, I don't want any upstairs, so he added a wing onto the house. And we've been adding ever since. This room was added, this room was added, the decks were added. Just like Jim always said in the store, Muriel's always adding on to the store. But that was bad. That was bad. Like I say, we brought Fred, then we noticed that he looked red. Well, we brought him out to the sanatorium. That was still in operation then. And Dr. Moody looked at him and he said, you take him to the hospital. And the skin was burned off his hand. He still has scars on the backs of his hands. And his hair was all burned off, and he had just a big bubble on top of his
that's
head.
when they didn't have the throwaway diapers back then, and Muriel had a pair of little rubber pants on them, and they were melted. When I grabbed him out of the crib, I was at his balls looked like all I could see is holler. So then Brother Rich tried to get up the stairs, and the door slammed shut, and they come up in the fire department. We pumped water. That's when they saved the outside structure. We cut a hole in the ice out there by this pond. We started pumping, and we saved the outside, but that was about it.
The inside was...
And I've often wondered what went through Grandpa's mind when he didn't know...
I went pounding on the door down there with the kids.
At the Brown house, pounding on the door, the front door. He was and they came in, and I can wonder what happened, what went through his mind, because the kid, their snow boots fell off. Either one was standing with bare feet in the snow, and Muriel, I suppose, what the hell happened? He didn't know.
Yeah.
And Ed come running up here, and then but I often wonder what went through his mind when she's standing with all the kids in the snowshoes. I mean, it was bad.
Oh boy.
But we survived that one. Started over again.
Yeah.
It's kind of a thing like our whole family's been that way. Grandpa Erickson burnt out on the old farm. I mean, he never gave up. I mean, I always look at Ed. I look at those pictures. My dad, when the auto had sunk down at Noggin, you've seen pictures. He wouldn't give up. He never gave up. I mean, a lot of people have said, "The hell with it." When you I look at some of those pictures today, and I said, "Christ, it was kind of impossible to even get it out of there."
Yeah.
But that's been the kind of the history of our family is totally it out.
Yeah.
So, but there was talking of getting back to Muriel mentioned about the hard work, and Grandma Erickson they interviewed him back when I think there was their 50th anniversary. They had a picture out in the store. The caption on the bottom says, "The harder we worked, the better off we were." And she was a kind of an entrepreneur of. She owned. I said if she had lived, she'd owned all of Bayfield at one time, because she was buying houses, selling houses, and renting houses. And just she was that way. So they worked very hard, the two of them, in raising a big family. And I mean the thing of the hard times, the bad times, the good times, but it all ended up pretty well for them in the end. So
The kids will never forget the Christmases that we always used to gather at Grandma and Grandpa Erickson's, and there was how many of them, Jim? 50, 60 people. And everybody got together, everybody ate. The women worked and served the men, and then we sat down and ate
Here.
after it was
See,
over.
He always, here's Richard, my brother Richard and I, way back. I was 6 years older, but Richard was taller than I. I don't know what the hell I got cheated in my shortness. I took after my mother, I suppose.
Yeah,
Ho-
yeah.
Hold it steady, pointed, yeah, let's see, so there's not a... So that's you and Richard there?
Yeah.
You're where, which one are you?
Which one right here? I'm the
You're over there,
big
okay.
brother. But when Muriel mentioned that, right here is Grandpa,
Right,
and he always gives the grandkids $1, brand new dollar bills. So here's Richard getting his, and I'm getting mine. No, I'm looking at you look like the got glasses. This is Richard, and this is me. But see that dollar bill in Grandpa's hand? He's handing us our dollar,
yeah.
and I still have mine. And I think Richard always carried his, with him too. So, and I'm sure Nancy has it yet.
So that's
today.
Martin in the middle there.
Martin in the middle.
Hmm.
And
That every little kid got
every
$1.
little kid got $1.
They lined up.
Yeah, lined up to get their dollar. So, and the big kids did too.
Yeah.
And he did that right till he died,
Right
practically?
till he died.
Yeah.
Because he had Lena go down and get the brand new crisp $1 bills, and then stand there and hand each one of us a dollar bill. So and all the kid, we got pictures where all of my family, our family, and like Richard's family, Jackie's family,
Mm-hmm.
all stood in line.
Oh boy.
I had up to get their price. At that time, I think it still cost about $60, $70.
Yeah, I'm sure there was lots of us.
Yeah,
There was lots
So-
of us. And everybody had big families.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
But that's that one there.
Now, would your family come up here and gather too? From Ashland? Your folks and...
oh yes,
Yeah.
oh yes. Well, what we would do is that we would gather with them on Christmas Eve, and then we'd all go to the Ericksons for Christmas Day. So we had two big
For the lutefisk.
scenarios. Yeah, we always had lutefisk at Erickson's.
What did you guys have? The Dutch, what was their traditional?
We would have pigs in the blanket,
Uh-huh.
as I remember. And my mother always prepared lots of chicken and baked beans and scalloped potatoes. That's kind of a tradition at her place. So,
Yeah, we all every Sunday. Either Fred and Bee would come over here, or we'd go over there. Never miss a Sunday. And it got to be, but she always brought. She brought baked beans, Muriel's mother, and the meat. Either chicken or roast. So I always said, "Well, when are you coming over, Bee?" I said, "Well, don't forget the meat," because she always had to bring something over.
Yeah.
And she always, I always tell a lot of people, I says, get along good with the mother-in-law, because she always said, "Jim, you're my favorite son-in-law." I says, "Well, I'm the only one you got." I didn't mean it that way. She said, "You're still." So I says, "Whoever gets married, get on the good side of the mother-in-law. First thing you gotta do." So,
What'd you call her? Beatrice
was her name, but
Ah,
I always call her
B.
B.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I can remember when we got married, or before we got married, my mother said to me, "Don't come crying home if you and Jim have a fight, because I'm not going to listen to it." She said, "You'll forgive him and I never will." She said, "Keep your problems to yourself." And I did.
That's right.
did.
Oh,
But of course, those 47 years of bliss, there was
Yeah.
never any
I don't
problem.
know why you never have one. There was never no problems.
Right, right.
Oh,
Yes.
Well, what kind of, I know you guys have been really active in this community, over the years. What would you point to as your,
Well,
the groups you've been involved with and what you've done within the Bayfield?
I've always, the Chamber of Commerce, I've always said, like the Apple Festival, I'm not claiming any for the first two. claim a little
Fame.
fame to the one that's proceeding right to this day that I gave birth to. It was all decided in the back end of Julian Nelson's little clothing store. Julian worked very, very hard on this thing. We all did. There was 3 guys.
What year was this now?
Well, this is the 40th one. It had to be in
61.
61.
Mm-hmm.
And people they kind of moan about the chamber sometime, but I like to admire them for carrying this thing on. Without the chamber, it never would have went.
So what were you and Julian talking about then? Why were
Well, we
why
were trying to
doing
think
this?
of something to do. We were trying to make some money. Because when we took the chamber over, it was in the red about $3,000-4,000, which is not a lot of money in today's way. They run it today. And I've always was very proud of one thing. We left it with the chamber. We left the chamber after 8 years. A lot of hard work, and funny Muriel ever put up with me all those because I was down there with Dalrymple Park and the chamber, and we left them with a $3,000 or $4,000 up.
Mm-hmm.
And
But you devised the Apple
We
Festival
devised
to
the
make money.
to make money, and that was, and I think that after people found out that it was making money, I mean, it extended the business.
Mm-hmm.
Because I remember right after Labor Day, you could shoot a cannon up and down the street, which I think a lot of people moan about it sometime, but extended the business in Bayfield. I think now today they know, business people know how important it is.
Well,
And,
how many were here for that first Apple Fest, would you say?
Well, I think we talked about this, Julian and I, one day, and I think there's over 5,000 or 6,000 people showed up.
For the very first one?
Very first one, because Julian was really kind of the kicker in this thing, because he was on that ferry boat, and I can't remember what channel it was, but he got to know one of the guys. There's 6 or 3,
Mm-hmm.
and TV was young, and so we always talked about it. The guy that really helped promote this thing he's deceased now. I can't think of his name. Julian would remember. And but Julian was one that was very instrumental in getting all this free advertising for
Mm-hmm.
Bayfield for this Apple Festival. And so then we decided, well, we're gonna have the first festival. Well, we should have a festival. We're gonna have a queen. So John Annan had all these girls out there, and so Mary Halverson Annan. Now, so what the heck? So we didn't have no contest. Her father was in the orchard business, and we just went out and we picked the queen. So the board members did this. I mean, it was so that's how that took place. It was a done
It was
deal.
an apple
It
grower's
was an apple grower's daughter. She was in
and
high
we
school.
thought
so-
that was appropriate.
Yeah.
To have an apple grower's daughter, as long as there was an apple grower who had a daughter old enough to be queen.
Yeah, right.
And our daughter Cindy was queen. Hausers had theirs daughter's queen. So the Webbers have I think Jack. They have all most of the apple growers'
Yeah.
daughters were been queen.
So did you have a parade that first year? And
We had a parade the first year, which I've never missed a parade.
you haven't?
I've never missed one. And I always was kind of disappointed with some of the farmers. They should get down there. I said, I don't give a damn if you just drag a bushel basket down the street.
Yeah.
Participate in it. But I think Hausers and myself, our orchard, never missed. Had something.
Having a float.
Having a float in
Mhm.
the parade. And a lot of the other guys, they come and go, but
Yeah.
I think it's very important. I wish they'd all jump in there and do something, but well, that's their business. But
Well, now there's so many booths and
There's so
people
many
come.
booths,
What
there's-
was it like in the first? Were there
well, it was
booths
just,
then?
there
or-
was but the schools, in which they made money. I mean, it was a good money maker. It was a kind of a community. It wasn't too
It was
many
just
outside-
local people that would
people.
have
Churches
a
and
booth. The
schools.
Churches and
churches
schools
the
and
classes at
classes
school
at
were
school.
always trying to raise money.
Raise money, and I kind of I was always for that big time because they were keeping their hands out of the parents' pockets.
Yeah.
They're out there making their own money for different events, but that seemed like that's kind of fallen away.
Mhm.
Well, now it's gotten to the point where it's so busy during apple time, there's too many things going on for the farmers. We still have a apple booth downtown where we sell various things, but we're so busy up here, we really wouldn't have to have a booth downtown at all.
We do it because we,
Yeah.
It's tradition.
Yeah.
Tradition. And of course, during that time, all of our kids come home, and it's payback time. They help mom and dad during apple time.
If they didn't,
Huh?
we could never do it.
No, we couldn't.
If the kids, because you can hire a lot of people, but they're not dedicated there as much as their own family.
And they have fun.
And the husbands are all there. They know this. Don't plan nothing.
Right.
That weekend.
That's part of the wedding vows when they marry one of the Erickson daughters, that apple festival time you help. Yes.
Now, what kind of apples do you have here now? And has that changed from the early days? I mean, when you first started, or when the apple orchard was first started, what kind of apples?
Well, when the first apples, the main apple up here, was the Wealthy and the Dudleys, and there were a lot of early varieties, Transparents, the Whitney Crabs. That's some of the old timers. But then the Cortlands came in. This orchard was planted here. It was a very young orchard when Muriel and I bought this place. This Cortland orchard we have out here right now. And Cortland wasn't really well known around here. And so now it seems like it's got to be the apple for this area. McIntosh are still a very good apple. There was the McIntosh, but in the Wealthies, that was the main two.
Mm-hmm.
And the Dudley was kind of the early one that we could haul out of here. And now today I planted some Honey Crisp. And I got the Connell Reds and Firesides and something that wasn't here years ago, but they've been around quite a few years. Like the Firesides and the Connell Reds, but all this Honey Crisp, that's kind of a new variety. It looks like it's going to do pretty well here.
Mm-hmm.
And the pears too do very well here.
Yes, we do very well. A lot of people they figure, I had to take a lady out one day to show her we raised pears. She didn't believe me. I had to show her the tree. Well, you're too far north, blah blah,
But the climate, what is there about the climate that makes it great?
The lake and top of this hill is kind of a remote area. And really, that's why people can't understand why you raise apples up here, we can't do it up there in Duluth. See, another thing, getting back to the apple festival.
Mm-hmm.
When I blew out a tire in Duluth, true story, and I opened up the back doors, I blew it going out across the old bridge. I paid my money and
You were hauling apples
to North Dakota.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And I blew the tire. So I was limped down to West Duluth. It was an all-night truck stop. And opened up the back there. Just no big deal. I forgot the spare. So I called my brother Richard up, got him out of bed about 1 o'clock, I guess. So he came up to the farm. The spare was in the old apple shed. So he runs the spare up to me. And this kid said to me, he said, "Where are you from?" I said, "Bayfield." He said, "Where the hell's that?" Oh, okay. And I don't know this guy's a lot of little towns. And he said, "What are you hauling?" I said, "Apples." I had my name, James Erickson Orchards, on the side of this truck.
Mm-hmm.
In Bayfield, Wisconsin. But at that time, there were a lot of apples from Michigan going out west. So he said, "What are you doing, hauling apples out of Michigan?" I said, "No, we raise them." He says, "You can't raise them down there. We can't raise them up here in Duluth." And at that time, this Diamond Clark, I was right across the street from this all night where they run 24 hours a day making these crescent wrenches, and they would start out making horseshoes in this place in Duluth. And these guys used to stop at that gas station and have a cup of coffee or whatever before they went home. And I sold 25 bushel apples off that truck, waiting for Richard to bring the tire up. And everybody's asking where the hell Bayfield was. And I said, "Oh, you call it," a lot of them, some knew where it was, but you can't raise apples down there. And that's when I thought, what the heck, I'm going to run another 350 miles, and people 85 miles away don't even know we raise apples down here.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the kickoff of that apple festival too.
You want to promote the
Promote and promote it and to let people know.
sell
we
the
raised-
apples.
And at that time, I never thought that we'd ever turn into what it's doing today. And we started the Pick Your Own operation about 30 years, 25 years ago, in which a lot of the people thought it was crazy, but it's turning out everybody's doing it. And I don't truck any more apples, and I think we're raising more apples, just as many on this farm as we did back then. I don't have many wealthies left, of course, but I make cider out of those anyway. And I think Hauser's, they used to truck apples. Betzel's trucked apples. Weber's, there was always, on Sunday night, it looked like wagon train leaving Bayfield. All running west. Go west, young.
So you sell all your apples right here, out of here?
I'd say a lot, most of them. And I do sell in Duluth, and we do have a few stores. But the biggest percent of the bulk of them is sold right here. That cuts down on the packaging. I don't know how you could even truck today out peddling apples with the cost of gas
Right.
and hotels. And
But you don't have to, Jim.
I know,
You
we don't have to
They
anymore.
come to us rather than us going to them.
Yeah.
And of course, the little store kind of complements that too. And
I think
so they shop in the store. We have buses that come up to the store. And of course, when I retired, then we started making all of our apple goodies, apple cider donuts and pies and muffins and cookies and all that kind of stuff during apple time. So
well,
it's an
Now-
addition, but also a complement to the apple business and to the berry business. People come up and buy berries, or they might come to the store. Oh, you have berries, so then they'll pick berries. And
buy
of
it.
course, in the fall too, we have pumpkins and squash and things that we raise in the garden. Right now, the corn is just about ready to harvest, isn't it?
yeah. Well, Muriel and I, we drove, trying to figure out a lot of the orchards in the Twin Cities, a lot of the big orchards around. To survive, they had to put in something like we got right here. And without this, without her idea, I mean, we wouldn't be doing that. That's why the orchard business, it's just a little bit more lucrative than it ever been in our history here.
Did you have the idea before you retired? You were sort of planning to do
Oh,
it?
yeah. Sure.
Yes.
Because we were dribbling along with a little bit. Muriel would make a little jam in her spare time, so we had something in the store out there, but she was teaching, so during the summer she'd make a few jars of this, some apple butter, and well, pretty soon it was going off the shelf after she could put it up there. So then she was working at night, teaching and making jams and jellies and this and that, and finally, it got to the point where I started adding on to the store for her.
Yeah.
But that's after she retired, of course, but it started before that, a little bit, when the little store was there. And she started putting a few items in there. And I think Ralph Mueller, the one we bought the cider press from, she put stuff in on consignment, like people making their wares, and we'd sell them that way to get some inventory.
Craft type.
Type
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And because it costs so damn much to get started in that thing to get the business. So, but she's on her own now.
Yeah. You go to these
I go to market.
markets and stuff, don't you? And buy this stuff.
Purchase things. If you're going to have, like I said, buses come up in groups of people, you have to have something there for them to look at and to buy and so on. And it's kind of trying to guess what will be a saleable item. And of course, I still make the jams and jellies. I make about 4,500 jars of jam and jelly and pickles and stuff in the summer. So I'm not really retired.
No, I guess not.
In fact, right now I should be out there making jam and jelly. So it's a lot of work, but we do have that time off in the winter, so that's fine.
Wow.
As long as I can keep going and keep healthy,
Yeah.
we'll continue doing it. So
And when did you start making cider?
Well, of quite a few of us farmers many years ago, we bought our first cider press. That's an Ottawa Keene company, the fish company, which is Bedeen's today. And old Russ Valentine was a great guy. He lived in a night house there too.
Mm-hmm.
And he was out to help the area. And the farming, the fishing, the whole thing. And they were a little slack in July fishing, so we got into South Strawberry. We brought all our strawberries down there. So then the apple thing come up. So we went to, we bought the first cider press over in Michigan. Well, that wasn't something. Frankfort, Michigan.
When was that then, you think?
Well, that was, geez, that was in the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
We brought that thing back. It was a monstrosity. I mean, Gene Weber and old Russ and myself. Gene had a pulp truck. And we took that thing, we went to, we landed in Ludington, Michigan, went across in a car ferry out of Two Rivers. Went across and everybody looking at this old pulp truck. And it was quite an experience. It was the first year they put the bridge across St. Ignace, because we had to take the ferry boat across. We were working on the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
We got that thing we got it back to Bayfield, and Russ was quite handy with machine tools. He the best welder. He could weld. He could build cabinets.
Russ who?
Russ Valentine.
Russ Valentine, okay.
Russ Valentine. I said he could do anything, and he was for the area. He did anything to try to help out, make a dollar. So we got this thing back, and he did a lot of work on it. We put it right today where that guy is rebuilding boats.
Mm-hmm.
It ended up called the winery. So all of us guys were peddling apples out of Bayfield at that time, and so each one of us, we had milk cartons. And not knowing too much about the apple cider business, it ferments, right?
Right.
It turned to wine or vinegar, like Swede says. So we brought it back, and we started making. So each one of us guys would take a bunch of gallons or half gallons, and would haul and put them in stores. And it worked for a while, but then the stuff was fermenting pretty fast. So we'd wait for a couple of weeks and go out to stores. I remember Bud Weber, Hauser's, myself. Boy, they'd go back in about 3 weeks, and the storekeeper was ready to kill you. I know I spent a lot of time cleaning out coolers because the stuff was blowing up.
Oh my God.
It was out west. So that kind of fizzled out, that thing there. Well, then, when Ralph Mueller came and he started we got the first press going at Spring Hill Orchards. So then I was working down there with him. He was custom squeezing for a few of us. Well, and then he bought one small machine. Well, matter of fact, I still have the Spring Hill. I bought all his equipment, but I was making cider with him down there 25 years ago, and then I moved it out. Matter of fact, we owned it. I bought it and it was down there for 2 years before we built this new building.
Mm-hmm.
I had someplace to put it. Now I'm into the pasteurizing and the whole 9 yards.
So how many gallons of cider do you put out?
For ourselves, we put about 6,000 to 7,000 gallons up. And now that we bought the pasteurizer, I think it's going to sell because everybody that E. coli thing.
Yeah.
So I spent 2 days in Madison to go to this HACCP plant. So I'm an official cider manual.
You got certified.
I'm certified now.
Yeah.
So finally got a diploma.
You're pasteurized.
I'm pasteurized.
Yeah.
I finally got a diploma. Took me 71 years to do it. But you want to keep up with the times and do it, you don't have to do it. I mean, that's the way it is. So
I think, are you the only one that has a pasteurizer?
right now, up in this area.
Oh, you are.
In this area. So,
Because
and if you're going to sell in stores, you have to pasteurize the cider.
Is that a state law now?
It's
or-
gonna
It
be,
is,
especially-
well, it is a law, Jim.
well,
You
it's going to be
cannot
next
sell.
year. It's right now. You can get by with it, But as of next year, it's gonna have to be
I
pasteurized.
see.
And you gotta put the label on the warning. That's why I bought this thing. I didn't want to put a warning label on.
No.
It's kind of funny. People will, you can put all the warning labels you want on cigarettes. The more you put on, the more people buy them. But you put one warning label on something you're going to eat or something. My God, the red flag comes up, and so they won't
Yeah.
buy it. I mean, so that's the reason why we're doing this.
Well, the stores won't buy it.
No,
You can't sell to
You
the
can't-
stores
right now.
Yeah.
if
right.
it isn't pasteurized.
Right.
And as of up to this year, you could, but and I still think because that's what they were saying at that class I was at in Madison for 2 days. But as of next year, no more.
Yeah.
It's got to be pasteurized. And there's even a lot of big orchards just kind of they just said the heck with it, quit.
Hmm.
So
It's a big investment.
So what percentage of your crop goes to the cider then?
well,
Roughly.
not a I'd say a third of it.
Hmm. The rest you sell,
Sell here fresh,
right?
and pick your own is a big thing for us. It really helps ourselves.
Right.
And it helps, I think it helps all the orchards out big time. So,
Mary Ann just said that Father Miller's here, wants to see you.
Okay, we'll take a break. Let me just get.
the love of my life. I was always,
Who hang on a second here. Jimmy, who has the Cindy Marie now?
Dean Halverson, I sold it to him. And I told him, I says, if you take the name off of it, I'm taking it away from you. So he agreed to that. So they don't have any girls anyway, so they're going to keep the name of the Cindy Marie on it. And I had one regret about that. Is, Grandpa Erickson always wanted to steal a steel boat.
Mhm.
So after he passed away, I got $1,000 from his inheritance, and I put that $1,000 in the Cindy.
Hmm.
So, and I fished on it once in a while with Deanie.
Oh, you still do?
Oh yeah, last spring, last fall, a year ago, I was on there fishing for a couple of days, fishing some whitefish. He was catching so damn many. I said, I wish I would never have sold it. So then last fall, he bought another boat, so I helped him dress herring and stuff. So I like to keep doing a little bit of it.
Keep your hand.
But I don't have to get down the bilge anymore, clean out the bilges. But I like to work on it. I like to be around it a little bit. So
Be out in the lake.
be on the lake.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So
Well, what? It seems like everybody I talked to had close calls out in that lake.
oh yeah. We've had some-
What's some that you had? Or
Well, I had some. I wish I had any pictures right here on handy, but at the time I got caught in that 72-mile-an-hour wind, and that's an old hard Russell. Madeline clocked the winds at that time, and we came in on a west wind within December, and I got down around 0, and we iced up so bad that we had I sneaked behind the island a couple of times to knock the ice off her, and we got to Bayfield. She had a pretty good list on her. And matter of fact, there was some pictures around of it, but lost the propeller on her one time outside of Outer. We were lifting fat nets, and we lost it at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. 15 miles out.
what do you do?
Well, we laid there, and then a big storm was coming, and I had the old AM radio. Took it apart, did everything I could think, nothing would work. But they couldn't call Bayfield, they couldn't hear me, and Duluth. But there was a boat, the Armco was coming out of the Sioux, Michigan, and they knew there was a boat in trouble outside of Outer.
Mm-hmm.
So they watched for me, and then the wind came up. So we laid there, we lost the wheel about 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And then we started drifting. We were 28 miles northeast of Otter Island Light when the Armco picked us up.
Whoa.
And blow. I'll tell you. Good, and it started to rain. Good thing the rain, I always said the rain would really kept the sea down. It started to pour so bad. and I put a sea anchor out because the damn boat was just rolling in the trough. So I finally got a fish box and rigged something up. So then I got her bow to lay it at least into the wind.
Mm-hmm.
But we kept on drifting. When the Armco picked us up, we were 28 miles northeast of Outer Island Light.
And you would have kept going.
We'd have kept on, yeah. We would land up on the North Shore. And then finally, about 4 o'clock in the morning, I was up all night. Bucky Patan was with me, and old Leonard Gordon. And so the Coast Guard kept saying, well, how many people aboard? Well, they go through their routine.
Yeah.
So Bucky got a little upset when they started asking the age. He said, "We'll give this shit a hold you. Get us the hell out of here."
Yeah.
So then that's when the Armco, they had the AMs and the FM radios.
Right.
So they got a hold of the Coast Guard. Then they could start talking like we'd hear everybody. And we could hear on that old. That's where the trouble. They got so much skip on the old AM radios. I mean, I could hear people in Mexico, down in the Gulf of Mexico talking. I couldn't get to Bayfield or Duluth even, but they heard me at the Sioux. So they was on the lookout, and it would turn so foggy. I could still see that big Armco coming through. It looked like this big building coming through the little Cindy sitting down alongside that thing. So they hooked onto us and towed us up to Outer Island, and the Coast Guard come out and hooked onto us and towed us into Bayfield.
Right. Oh boy. Close call.
Yeah, it was. It was. You get like the guy says, I get a little concerned about that time.
Yeah.
Especially when it's blowing like that, boy.
Mm.
In the fog and so. And that was. But I always keep on referring to Grandpa Erickson. Obviously, I think he taught Ed, myself, Mal, you better have respect for Lake Superior.
Right.
He says, so we were always pretty cautious. Try to do the best, I mean, you get into a situation sometime, but if you don't lose your head and try to make the best of it, and at least don't jump ship. I mean, that's the way it was. And I think he taught all my Uncle Mal and my dad respect, and they had a lot of,
Now, who was fishing in the early days with you, and not just on your boat, but who was around you fishing?
What do you mean?
Fishing out of Bayfield and.
Oh, Jim Frostman. He came back. All the Batans, the time when I was fishing, Morris Batan, all the Batans, not all the Batans, but Allison was, when he died, well then Ronnie and Bubsy, they took over. I mean, Ronnie took over his dad's boat, and Robert Batan, Bubsy we call him,
Mm-hmm.
he bought his own small boat. One of my, cousin John, Jackie.
Mm-hmm.
So there was quite a few that was kept on fishing. I don't know, there was Reuben Nelson, there was, at one time, Harvey Lyle Nurse, he was still fishing then,
Mm-hmm.
until the DNR said he didn't catch enough fish. That's when they took the license away from Uncle Mel too. And he was the guy that fished all his life. He didn't qualify for a license because he didn't catch enough whitefish. Under all these restrictions, you couldn't do it.
Right.
And I just lucked out by a few pounds. Because I was farming and, trying to do both. And I just made it back. And I could never figure that one out too. Because old Harvey Nurse was pretty upset about that.
I'll bet.
They took his
Well,
license.
it's a catch-22 situation.
Yeah, they took his license away from him. And
Now, when you gave up your license, did they buy you out? How did that work?
they bought my trout quota, and they bought the license. That's why they got away with it. And they did. The DNR still don't want to admit, but they know they're wrong. that that license, that commercial fishing license, was a property right. When California, Washington State, Minnesota, Michigan know it's a property right. It was a very rare license because nobody owns that. Everybody owns those fish, and all the commercial fishermen was doing was giving you or anybody that didn't even like to go out fish, hook or line, but still want to eat that fish, give you the privilege to buy that fish. That's why this is a license was a property right.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody, a lot of people don't agree with it, but it went to court, and it was proven a property right, all except the state of Wisconsin.
Is that right?
Oh yeah, they didn't want to. They finally, the guy that was trying to prove it was the Schwers from Algoma, not Algoma, from Two Rivers. They tried to prove, but I think they ran out of money.
Mm-hmm.
So they the state kind of let it go like a no contest type thing. You know.
Right.
You know, they just kind of slide with it. The guy was really pursuing it, but he just got tired. I got some court documents on it yet.
Well, you fought it for a long time, didn't
Fought
you?
it a long time. Fought him.
Yeah.
And
You finally
see, their
got-
idea was,
Okay, we're back on.
but you know, when well, people don't understand. We were under restrictions for many, many, many years, and but we were still making a pretty fair living. All of us were. You know, you put a lot of effort in. We were fishing, you know, the chubs, the herring, the whitefish, and we were out on a quota for many years on trout. So we never really depended on that for making money anyway. So, but when the DNR came and put the effort thing on to us, what I mean by effort is we were allowed to fish 10,000 foot of net a day, which sounds like a lot, but it's not. When you talk about the old times, these guys used to lift 20,000 nets a day, net 25,000 feet of net. So when they did that to us, what I mean by then they give us 90,000 foot of effort. Okay? So that means whatever came first. If I'd fished my 10 boxes of nets, I was done in 9 days for the whole year. See, people didn't realize what they were doing. Whatever came first, so they give us 650 trout to catch. So then, if you went out, target the trout, and you're damned for there, then they say, well, look at there, he's just targeting trout. I could never see what the hell the difference was because they allowed these fishermen to catch that many trout. So if you caught it with 1 lift, 2 lifts, or whatever, 9 times out of 10, none of us ever finished our quota because we're after the whitefish.
Yeah.
Pretty soon we run out of effort. So we were working this thing with Barb Linton and a few others, and Tommy Thompson vetoed this thing back in the first round because the DNR told him we didn't hurt those guys at all. So okay, they weren't gonna buy out no businesses. We had it going, so then that kind of fell by the wayside. So anyway, I went and got the Sea Grant people because they wouldn't listen to us. So this Hovey up there, he went and got all the. See, there's another agency, but don't agree with the DNR.
Mm-hmm.
So he went and got all the paperwork together. Found out was how much money was lost in 1 year in this little community when they put the hammer on us, put the footage thing on us, was $250,000.
Just in this.
1 year. That's from the Port Wing. It was not much down on Corny from Port Wing to Bayfield.
Mm-hmm.
So when I met with Thompson, the governor, I had all this stuff with me. I met him he was on the campaign trail. Met him down Hayward at some convention. I showed him this. Well, he says, those liars told me they never hurt you. I said, so we went from $250,000 down to nothing. And so
Am I
then
done?
so then I says, well,
Sure.
Okay.
so then I said, let's do like the sportsmen do. We'll multiply that by 8. We're talking a couple $1 million. In this northern little area, can't afford to lose $2 million. I mean, of commodity that is non-pollutant. It was a good fresh money coming into this area. So then he took another look at it. And
Is that when the notion came to buy you out?
that's when the notion came. Then they knew, because their idea was to regulate us out.
Mm-hmm.
And they were doing a hell of a good job on that one. Oh yeah, because that's what this Jim Addis, he did down Lake Michigan and Lake Erie. That was his, they had him hired, that was his private job.
Mm-hmm.
He picked them off one at a time.
Right.
And he was going to do the same thing here. And I see the DNR always said, well, when we get the trout back to 50% of natural reproduction, we're going to increase your quota. Well, see, there's so much money involved with sportsmen and all that thing. So anyway, Jim Frostman and I took it upon ourselves. I told the rest of the guys we got to start doing something. We'll keep our own data. So Jim and I did this for the whole spring fishing under this restriction thing. Because I was lifting a couple boxes to nets, trying to stretch it out. Jim was doing the same. We put all our data together, and so we come up with 85% of natural reproduction. Now you want to see some red faces, so then I had Howard Larson, good friend of mine. He compiled all this together. I brought this to Madison. A good friend of mine had a good fall. He's on the DNR board. Steve Willett, he's on this side of Highway 8.
Mm-hmm.
So he brought this down. So all of a sudden, the DNR come up with 80%. Now, so then Steve says, well, what the heck's going on here? I mean, those fish multiplied that much in a couple months? I can't believe this. So that changed a lot of, we proved to them where they were lying.
That there were enough fish.
There was enough fish.
Yeah.
We proved to them. But then that's when the buyout, and they were not gonna raise this quota and they still haven't. Till the year 2005 or 6. Well, hell, that's been, they would have got rid of us anyway.
Yeah.
So we figured that's when we come up with this buyout, and they went along with it.
Right.
So we had another package going. What really pushed them was the tribal was going to buy us out. That's when they really got upset. That's when the wheels really started turning. So I guess the license are laying on the shelf down in Madison.
Yeah. So your license is dead now.
Well, not
Done
really.
with.
If they see an opportunity where I see the year 2005 or whatever, they might, if they feel there's room for a couple more, they can give these back.
I see.
I don't ever foresee it to happen,
Yeah.
but that was the talk they give us anyway. But at least we got something out of it. And we never got the deal they got over in Michigan. But see, the state bought us out for $1.5 million, $1.25 million. State of Michigan, I got that document too. I followed them. 17 million.
Oh boy. So that $1.5 million was spread among everybody.
That's $1.5 million.
Everybody.
So everybody thinks it's a big deal. All it wasn't. It was better than nothing. But there's a couple of guys over there got $3.5 million per license.
Oh boy.
Oh yeah,
That would have been nice.
that would have been. And what you talk about $1 million? What's that? It's nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, we were making, if you put all this together, fishing, that was peanuts, in a 10, and they bought it on a 10-year program, bought us out in a 10-year program.
Right.
So if they put that money aside, it's not going to cost them a dime anyway.
Yeah.
They still got it for nothing.
Well, guys like Deanie and Marty are still
Marty
going.
and the guy there on the hang in there, and I think Deanie's going to do very well. He's a hard worker, and he's trying to keep up with the times. He's bought himself a flaying machine. He's in the trap nets, and the few guys, they're going to make it.
Yeah. So it'll
And I
still go
think-
on, you think?
I hope so, and I hope the Indian, the tribal fishermen are. I said don't give them too much. Don't play ball with them too much because they're gonna screw you in the end.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that the fishermen that are out there, the few guys that are left, it's nothing. I went to Rocky Island the other day. I couldn't believe it. I don't even see a net buoy
Yeah.
from here to Rocky. That's 18 miles.
And you used to see a
Well,
bunch.
quite so like going through a cedar swamp. I mean, buoys all over the place.
Yeah.
Everybody making a few bucks, but you got her down to nothing.
Now, where were your favorite spots to fish?
Well, we were always targeting the whitefish and like around the islands. You take like Otter Island, and there's even few different spots of that island. They're not all.
You knew them,
Well, yeah, you had you're born with them.
but you had kind of a gentleman's agreement. You'd
Right, on a
each-
gentleman's agreement, on the pine nets and trap nets, whoever was fishing there, we made that amongst ourselves. Now, I said, what the hell, the DNR is trying to make that law. I said, that's no law. They can't go out there, and that was an agreement the fishermen made by themselves.
you had your places.
We
Jim Frost
respected each other.
Yeah.
And if I was ever fishing trap nets or pine nets, they had a spot there, we left it alone. That was their spot.
Right.
But now they're issuing out, you take this spot, you take that spot. I said, this is a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah.
They don't do it in Lake Michigan. But,
So it's a
Another little
different era
squeeze.
now, isn't it?
oh yeah,
Yeah.
another little squeeze box. And I will predict one thing. Someday, I can see it happening right now, the DNR is gonna have to have somebody get rid of some of these fish. You can't, I don't think in the history of the sports fishery has ever been as thick as it's been today.
Mm-hmm.
And the fat trout are a big problem right now. Just before the buyout, or while we were negotiating the buyout, this Bill Smith, one of the DNR people from, he was out of Madison, out of Spooner. He said to me, he said, Jim, I remember you making a comment down in Madison about the fat trout, and everybody turned a deaf ear. That's going to be your big problem someday. Now it's a big problem
What's the problem?
because there's too damn many of these fat trout,
Mm-hmm.
and they're taking over.
From the
So
lake
I
trout
said,
and
I said
from-
the only reason that you listen now is now you're screwing the sports fishery. When they start to honk about it, when the hell now you're trying to think of it. You should have done something many years ago about it. Well, they said, well, we're not in the fish buying. I said, you're still fish biologists, and you're supposed to protect these species or whatever. So you should have tried to help or suggested some markets to get rid of those fat trout. We set them up a couple times. We had a informal meeting in Ashland, where Steve Willett again, he's on this side of Highway 8. No pushover now, don't ever think, because I don't want to ever, for the DNR, he's on the DNR board. Very intelligent guy, but he wants facts and figures. That's what he works on. So we brought this, Eric Johnson brought this question up to the DNR, Bruce Swanson and a few of these guys, these biologists. How much pressure can Lake Superior take commercially on the chub fishery? Couldn't answer it. So I went on. How much pressure can you do on the whitefish? Couldn't answer that one either. How much pressure can you put on the herring? Well, they were interested in the herring because they want to save that for a forage base for the lake trout. So how much pressure could you put on the fat trout, sisquets? Couldn't answer that. So then his last question was, how much pressure can you put on the lake trout? Oh, they had all those figures. So we said to him, well, how can you, what about the rest of these species? You don't know nothing about them. How come you only know about the sacred cow? There's a resource out there that's got to be handled right. Well, there was quite a few red faces over that. That's when Steve Willett says, well, how come you know so much about this one species, you don't know nothing about the rest of them?
Yeah.
So
your opinion, you think there's enough fish out there for commercial fishermen and sports fishermen?
there's a plenty. There's more than enough. See, we got our hands slapped again from the DNR when we tried to negotiate a deal with the Rod and Gun Club out of Ashland, which was working well. We tried to negotiate this thing. Okay, you guys, if you want to stay in a certain area, the commercial fishermen stay the hell out of there for the month you guys are trolling. Well, when the DNR found that out, they really got upset. There's no way in hell that you can do this. Oh, well, we're the ones that's doing it. We're the negotiators. Because back in the 40s, when when the commercial fishermen had their offer trolling, the Moons and all them, their main place was outside of Brownstone, North Twin Island. They wanted the commercial fishermen, would you stay out of there? Because we want to, no problem. They buoyed the goddamn thing themselves, and the commercial fishermen stayed out of there. It worked.
Yeah.
Everybody got along. So all of a sudden it wouldn't work now. Well, that's but see, the big white father wouldn't want to allow that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's the end of an
End of
era.
an era, and it's a sad, sad thing. See, everybody forgets what made our beautiful little Bayfield, or kept it. Logging was a short-term thing. I mean, they stripped it off, which wasn't right. There was no planning, and I'll admit, being a commercial fisherman all these years, there should have been, on both sides after the land free, there was maybe a little too much pressure put on, but that would after being controlled. But they didn't have to do what they did because there's a supply out there now, and I'm kind of afraid they're just gonna, like, you can't overpopulate anything. Disease is gonna come in here and they're gonna die.
Yeah.
So the guys that are left, I hope they make a good living. I'm not sure they will.
Well, I'm almost out of this tape, Jimmy.
Okay.
So, one last word on this subject can you give me?
Well, I was born and raised here. I love the area because I'm gonna die here.
Yeah.
The lake and I've always liked the farming in the both.
This is your home.
This is my home. And I'm very happy, like we discussed before, my kids are back here, and hopefully someday this farm will be theirs.
Well, let's hope so. And keep it on. Another
That's right.
generation. Well, thanks, Jimmy.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.